King Solomon is often celebrated as the wisest individual to have ever walked the earth, endowed by God with extraordinary wisdom, unparalleled wealth, and vast authority. Yet the question remains, what became of this remarkable king? How could a man so uniquely chosen and blessed by God find himself consumed by despair, haunted by regrets, and spiritually broken at the end of his journey? Stay with us as we delve into the lesser-known narrative of Solomon's final day, a poignant chapter marked by his reminiscence on a life of grandeur, his tragic mistake, and the profound repercussions of forsaking God's path. Uncover the journey of a king who possessed everything yet ultimately declared, "Everything is meaningless." Learn what his story holds for us in our lives today. Follow along to grasp the impactful lessons drawn from Solomon's life, lessons that remain relevant and transformative even now. What insights can we gain from the errors he made? How might we steer clear of the snares that ensnared him? This tale transcends the life of a single monarch. It resonates with everyone who has faced the battles of pride, succumbed to temptations, or felt the allure of material desires. If you feel inspired or enlightened by this video, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and activate the notification bell to stay updated with our content. Your support allows us to continue sharing inspiring biblical stories and profound life lessons with you. We'd love to hear your reflections and feedback. Which part of Solomon's story resonated most deeply with you? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. Engaging with our community's insights and stories is always a pleasure. Don't forget to spread this video to your friends and loved ones, ensuring these enduring lessons reach many. Let us journey into the closing chapter of King Solomon's life, exploring the profound truth behind his ascent, his tragic decline, and the somber conclusion of Israel's most wise ruler. Don't let this impactful tale pass by. It has the potential to shift your perspective on life itself. Let us begin. King Solomon's rule commenced with extraordinary potential and divine favor. As the son of David and Bathsheba, Solomon was divinely appointed to inherit the throne of Israel following David's tenure. From the outset, Solomon's life and reign were characterized by God's unmistakable favor and direction. In 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 5, the Bible recounts that the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at Gibeon, saying, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." In reply, Solomon made a humble yet profound request that would shape the course of his reign and legacy. Instead of seeking material riches, a prolonged life, or triumph over his enemies, Solomon requested something far more meaningful. Rather, in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 9, Solomon earnestly pleaded, "Give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was profoundly pleased with Solomon's petition, as stated in 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 10 to 14. God responded by bestowing upon Solomon unmatched wisdom and also assuring him of great wealth, honor, and longevity, provided he remained obedient to his command. Solomon's newfound wisdom was quickly tested when two women approached him, each claiming to be the rightful mother of a single infant. This incident, detailed in 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 to 28, exemplifies the divine insight granted to Solomon. Solomon proposed cutting the living child in two, fully aware that the true mother's love would compel her to relinquish her claim to save her baby's life. The Israelites were in awe of his profound judgment, recognizing that God's divine wisdom resided with their king. From that day forward, Solomon's renown began to extend across vast regions. In 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 29 to 30, the scriptures state, "God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight, and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore." Solomon's wisdom surpassed that of all the people of the East and exceeded even the famed wisdom of Egypt. According to 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 32, Solomon authored 3,000 proverbs and over 1,000 songs, addressing topics ranging from life and nature to governance and spirituality. The fame of Solomon's wisdom reached the Queen of Sheba, a prominent ruler who journeyed from afar to challenge his intellect with intricate questions. As recorded in 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 6 to 7, she proclaimed, The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true, but I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth, you have far exceeded the report I heard. This meeting underscored that the blessings bestowed on Solomon were not solely for his benefit, but also served as a testament to God's favor upon the nation of Israel. Perhaps Solomon's crowning achievement was the building of the Grand Temple in Jerusalem, a monumental task his father David had deeply desired to complete. The temple Solomon built, as described in 1 Kings chapter 6, stood as a breathtaking architectural wonder of the ancient world. Constructed using the most exquisite resources, including Lebanese cedar, gold, silver, and bronze, the temple required 7 years of meticulous effort. It became the heart of Israel's spiritual life, a sacred dwelling for God's presence among his people. In 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 10 to 11, the story of its completion is beautifully recorded. Upon its completion, Solomon led the people of Israel in a moving and solemn prayer to dedicate the temple to the Lord. According to 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 22 to 53, Solomon prayed fervently, praising God's unparalleled greatness and asking that he attentively hear the prayers of his people. His deeply sincere plea is encapsulated in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 23. Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth below. You who keep your covenant of love with your servants, who continue wholeheartedly in your way. During Solomon's reign, the nation of Israel ascended to remarkable levels of affluence, strength, and global prestige. The kingdom of Solomon became a symbol of prosperity, drawing merchants, intellectuals, and dignitaries from every corner of the known world. As noted in 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 23 to 24, King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. People from every nation sought to meet Solomon, eager to witness the divine wisdom that God had instilled in him. The wealth Solomon accumulated was truly beyond comprehension. He maintained dominance over critical trade routes linking Egypt and Mesopotamia, importing an array of riches such as gold, silver, ivory, exotic animals, and even peacocks from faraway regions. This is documented in 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 22. His impressive fleet, returning every 3 years with bountiful treasures, was a testament to his vast and far-reaching empire. In 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 14, it is revealed that Solomon's yearly revenue in gold amounted to 666 talents, equivalent to more than 25 tons annually. The throne of Solomon, as detailed in 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 18 to 20, was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Crafted from ivory and adorned with pure gold, the throne featured 6 steps, each flanked by 12 lions, one on either side of each step, symbolizing regal majesty and unmatched opulence. The palace was just one aspect of the extravagance. According to 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 21, King Solomon's goblets were gold, and all the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's days. This demonstrates the extreme wealth and extravagance of his reign, during which time even silver was viewed as banal and undeserving. However, this extraordinary wealth and power brought with it significant temptation. Solomon's political authority and influence prompted him to establish alliances with neighboring nations, frequently solidified through matrimonial ties. As detailed in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 to 2, Solomon loved many foreign women, including Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, nations the Lord had warned Israel against intermarrying with, for they would surely turn their hearts after other gods. Solomon, however, disregarded these divine warnings. The Bible recounts in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 3, he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. These marriages were not merely strategic political agreements. They were a direct violation of God's command in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 17, which instructed that the king must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray over the course of his reign. The sway of Solomon's foreign wives increasingly eroded his spiritual devotion. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 4 reveals, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. Although God had gifted him unparalleled wisdom, Solomon permitted his affection for these women to surpass his commitment to the God of Israel. Solomon's disobedience became evident in his establishment of high places, elevated sites where sacrifices and worship were conducted in honor of foreign gods. As stated in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 5, Solomon erected altars to Ashtaroth, the Sidonian goddess linked to fertility and sensuality, in direct opposition to God's sacred commands. Additionally, in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 7 to 8, Solomon built high places for Chemosh, the Moabite god, and Moloch, the Ammonite deity, whose abhorrent worship practices included child sacrifice, an act detestable to the Lord. These deeds were far more than gestures of cultural inclusion. They constituted explicit breaches of God's commandments, as outlined in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses 2 to 3, where he had commanded the Israelites to demolish all high places dedicated to foreign gods, not construct new ones. Thus, Solomon's actions represented a glaring and willful defiance of God's explicit instructions. The heartbreaking paradox of Solomon's life lies in the fact that the wisdom he once sought to distinguish right from wrong was ultimately eclipsed by his own ethical failings. He found himself ensnared in idolatry, a sin God had explicitly cautioned the Israelites against since the time of Moses. As written in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 3 to 4, God instructed, "Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, because they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods." Yet in spite of these unambiguous warnings, Solomon's heart was lured away. His wavering allegiance starkly contrasts with that of his father David, who, though flawed, maintained steadfast devotion to God. God's displeasure with Solomon was neither subtle nor concealed. The Lord had manifested himself to Solomon on two occasions, first in Gibeon and later in Jerusalem, renewing his covenant and cautioning Solomon to remain faithful. In 1 Kings chapter 9, verses 6 to 7, God had said, "But if you or your descendants turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you and go off to serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them." Despite these solemn admonitions, Solomon's heart grew calloused. He persisted in constructing altars and participating in idolatrous rituals. As recorded in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 9 to 10, the Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Even though God had explicitly prohibited Solomon from following other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. Solomon's devastating departure from God's path serves as a profound warning for all. This man, blessed with wisdom, riches, and God's favor, succumbed to the temptations of foreign deities and the pressures of those he surrounded himself with. He exchanged his loyalty to God for the approval of his wives and the idols they revered. The Lord, who had once blessed Solomon with abundance, now declared a stern judgment upon him, as stated in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 11. Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, "Because you have done this and have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant." This prophecy marked the onset of the United Kingdom of Israel's fragmentation. The once magnificent kingdom Solomon had constructed under God's favor was now destined for division, turmoil, and discord. God's judgment was both immediate and resolute, though softened by mercy out of respect for David, Solomon's father. The Lord decreed that the kingdom would not be torn away during Solomon's lifetime, sparing him the immediate consequences. But the full burden of this judgment would fall upon his son Rehoboam, as recorded in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 12 to 13. The divine judgment Solomon faced was a direct repercussion of his infidelity to God's covenant. Despite being chosen by God for an extraordinary purpose, Solomon's heart had wandered irreparably away from him. A vivid example of this judgment appears in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 29 to 31. The prophet Ahijah met Jeroboam, a high-ranking official under Solomon, outside Jerusalem. He tore his new cloak into 12 pieces and told Jeroboam, "Take 10 pieces for yourself. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. See, I am about to tear the kingdom from Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes on the final day of his life. King Solomon, once celebrated as the wealthiest and wisest man of his age, found himself seated in his palace, lost in thoughts about the grandeur and achievements that had once defined his rule. His years had been marked by astounding accomplishments, unmatched wisdom that drew admiration from nations, unimaginable wealth, and a kingdom that soared to its greatest heights during his reign. Yet these final hours were not colored by the happiness of these triumphs. Rather, they were overshadowed by profound feelings of loss, remorse, and the weight of his disobedience. The depth of Solomon's reflections is poignantly recorded in the book of Ecclesiastes, believed to have been written during the later years of his life. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2, Solomon mournfully declares, "Meaningless. Meaningless," says the teacher, "utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless." These poignant words reflect the deep void Solomon experienced as he reviewed a life that had deviated far from its intended path. Despite being endowed with extraordinary wisdom, Solomon had lost focus on the God who had generously bestowed everything upon him. As Solomon sat quietly in his palace, his mind journeyed through the events of his past. He recalled the momentous day he dedicated the temple, a majestic and sacred edifice constructed to glorify the Lord. This significant event is recorded in 1 Kings chapter 8. On that day, he fervently prayed for God's presence to fill the temple, and the Lord's glory descended like a cloud, signifying divine approval of Solomon's labor. Yet now Solomon's heart felt distant from the purity and devotion of those earlier days. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 10 to 11, Solomon candidly reflects, "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I examined all that I had achieved and the work I had done, everything was meaningless, like chasing the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun." The immense wealth Solomon possessed enabled him to indulge in every conceivable pleasure and luxury. He constructed magnificent palaces, cultivated vast vineyards, accumulated unimaginable treasures, and imported rare and exotic animals from distant lands. Solomon surrounded himself with hundreds of servants and musicians, ensuring constant entertainment and comfort. However, as he grew older, all these remarkable accomplishments began to feel utterly meaningless and empty. He had chased after all the wealth and pleasures the world could provide, yet in doing so, he had drifted away from his spiritual foundation. The king, once celebrated for his unparalleled wisdom, now realized that all his achievements were insignificant without a genuine relationship with God. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10, Solomon underscores the futility of material wealth. "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless." Solomon came to realize, albeit too late, that his insatiable desires had steered him away from the path of righteousness that God had set before him. During his youth, Solomon had enjoyed a close and intimate relationship with the Lord. He had constructed the temple to serve as a powerful representation of God's dwelling among his people. However, over the years, his numerous foreign marriages, political alliances, and compromises with idolatry gradually created a rift between him and the Lord. He abandoned his first love, the God of his youth, who had appeared to him in dreams and bestowed upon him unmatched wisdom. The writings attributed to Solomon reflect the journey of a man who experienced both the pinnacle of success and the depths of despair. In Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 to 6, Solomon had advised, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." Yet tragically, Solomon failed to heed his own wise counsel, instead pursuing the fleeting pleasures of this world. He relied on his own flawed reasoning and veered away from the straight and narrow path God had outlined for him. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13, Solomon concludes with this timeless truth, "Now all has been heard." Here is the conclusion of the matter: fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. These words, penned near the end of Solomon's life, encapsulate the profound realization he had reached, that true fulfillment is found only in obedience to God. The final day of Solomon's life stood as a somber reminder of the transience and futility of worldly ambitions. Though he had been blessed with the most extraordinary gifts, Solomon squandered them by allowing his heart to turn away from God. In his final moments, Solomon recognized that his wisdom, wealth, and power were meaningless without a heart fully devoted to God. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 29 captures his sobering realization. This only have I found God created mankind upright, but they have gone in search of many schemes. Solomon, once the wisest man of his era, became ensnared by the very schemes and desires he had cultivated. His final thoughts serve as a cautionary tale for anyone who seeks satisfaction in worldly pursuits instead of in a relationship with God. The story of Solomon stands as a powerful and sobering reminder of the necessity of remaining faithful to God throughout life. Solomon's last day was not one of triumph or festivity, but of sorrowful reflection on all that he had forfeited. His last years were marred by remorse, despite the fact that he had begun with such promise. His last years were marred by remorse, despite the fact that he had begun with such promise. The wisest king to ever live had painfully discovered that neither immense wealth, profound wisdom, nor indulgent pleasure could substitute for a heart wholly dedicated to God. Let us heed Solomon's concluding advice and understand that our ultimate purpose is not found in worldly achievements, but in revering God and living in obedience to His commandments. The legacy of Solomon reminds us that the most valuable treasures in life are not the ones we create for ourselves, but the relationship we nurture with our Creator. The closing day of Solomon's life was not filled with the joy of success, but was overshadowed by the grief of a life that had drifted away from God. May we draw lessons from his errors. Ultimately, it is not the way you begin, but how you end, that holds the most significance. Let us all endeavor to stay faithful to God throughout our lives, right until the very end. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this. If this video inspired or enlightened you, we encourage you to like, subscribe, and share it with others. Always remember that genuine wisdom lies in wholeheartedly following God with all your heart, mind, and soul.